If you're wondering how to keep loyal, high-paying clients as a coach or consultant, then in this video, I am going to share some secrets, tips, and tricks. Before we proceed, I recommend that you click subscribe and activate notifications for this channel so that in the future, if you want to know more sales tips, presentation tips, communication tips, or tips related to anything related to persuasion, you get that content immediately. Anyway, onwards to the main topic. Having loyal customers where they keep paying and you have a steady stream of income, and especially when we're talking about high-ticket clients, is not that easy. It's not just about doing a good job, although you also have to do that, but it's also about changing with the times. It's about expecting changes to expectations, pun unintended, then being able to change what you provide based on what the person needs at the end of the day. A part of this is very obvious, and a part of it's not so obvious. So let's take a look at a couple of insights which are crucial to actually keep these clients. So the first tip is that you have to expect changes in a relationship. What I mean by this is, it's very rare that you keep a client with the same exact program, such as a 6-month program or a project, year after year or time period after time period in the same exact circumstances. Because people change, right? For example, if a client comes up to you and they want a program such as a coaching program or a consulting service, then after 6 months, they may want something different, right? So you can't expect a renewal or a continuation of the relationship in the same format. For example, you may coach a person in terms of communication coaching, like I did, and then suddenly they actually become an ace in terms of communication. But now they want to become a speaker and they need help changing their career to have more opportunities as a speaker, or actually pursuing those opportunities, doing pitches, and so on. So what happens is that one specific service or coaching program may be completely different in scope from the next one, because the person literally changes. You think, hey, it's the same person, so the program shouldn't be that different from the previous one. And that is a mistake, because people can literally change, right? You can have a second program with the same client that is as different as you would expect from a completely different person if they came up to you. So for all intents and purposes, you can consider them to be different people when they enter a second program, a third program, and a fourth program. And if you're very lucky to have clients that stay with you over the years, you are going to notice bigger arcs in their change. Maybe they want to acquire new skills, or maybe they become rusty in other skills and they need to go back to basics in certain areas, or maybe they just keep evolving and you just have your work cut out for you because there's something new to explore and to teach in every single successive program. But the point here is that when you have a renewal, you cannot expect it to be the same relationship because the person will change and it may as well be a different person. Then another crucial thing to keep in mind is that you want to provide a derivative, not a function. What do I mean by this? Well, when you are providing a service, it gets better over time, right? But the problem is the person already expects that. So if you're able to recap in 10 minutes what the session was about in the first month, and then in successive months, you were able to recap it in 5 minutes, the person is not going to consider that. They are just going to get used to it, and they're going to expect you to become even better at summarizing the session, for example, or whatever it is that you're providing in terms of techniques. In other words, when you become better at something in terms of your service or your coaching, you don't step to a new level because the person gets used to that new level. You have to keep stepping up in terms of levels on and on as time goes by. Or using this math analogy, you have to provide a derivative, not a function. In other words, for example, they don't have to keep the same speed in terms of their evolution, they have to accelerate that speed. So it's not about just being better, it's about being better at being better, if you will. And it doesn't necessarily need to be in the same way. For example, you can become better at summarizing something in a session, you can become better at teaching a certain technique, you can become better at translating that technique to a real-world use case and doing it in a more seamless manner, and so on. But either way, you have to keep getting better, because if you just stay the same and the service keeps the same level of quality, that is not going to be considered a benefit by people. They're just going to expect more and more. Then you want to not keep clients hostage. What I mean by this is the following. There are a lot of people that in terms of their contracts, they put barriers to exit, or they have certain penalties, or they just make the client become dependent on them in terms of knowledge. And nothing could be further from having loyal clients than this, because at the end of the day, the client wants to be independent. Your service should be considered a bonus. It should not be assumed by the client. For example, in my methodology, I use an ECD or executive coaching diary, which is a document that is shared by both parties. So we can both take notes there, we can define the agenda for the next meeting, and so on. But what happens is, at the end of the ECD, there is something called the goodbye plan. And this is a plan that I write at the beginning of the relationship with recommendations on how the client can continue on their own. So if they were to quit from the moment that we first meet on the first session, they already would have a plan of how to continue on their own. And that plan just gets updated. And ironically, when you make your clients autonomous and they don't need you, they're going to go back for you, because you don't project neediness, you don't project that you want them to be trapped in a relationship. You're just saying, hey, If you want to continue the coaching or the consulting, that's interesting, but if not, here's how you continue on your own. And ironically, because you give them that much freedom, they use that freedom to come back to you. And of course, there's going to be people who leave, but even if you try to trap them and put up barriers to exit, they would still want to leave, and then you would have to deal with lawsuits or just unhappy customers at the end of the day. So if you do everything that you can for your clients to be autonomous, then a lot of them are going to stick with you just due to loyalty. Then another important thing to do here is to show your boundaries in terms of what you don't accept. There are going to be clients who are very obedient and very respectful, and they don't step on your toes, but you're going to have others maybe who are power shoppers or just that have a lot of power in their everyday life, and they're going to try to exert that power and kind of put you in your place or just test your boundaries. And what you want to do here, and this is very important, you want to draw those boundaries and don't allow that behavior, not allowing them to call you at 2 a.m. or not going over session time if you're doing sessions and so on. And you may think that this is paradoxical because you are going to irritate your customers a little bit, but what happens here is that a good relationship is based on loyalty at the end of the day and on respect. And when you draw these boundaries, they recognize you as a professional because you have these boundaries. But if you allow them to violate those boundaries, then they're going to respect you less. And what's going to happen is that the relationship is going to suffer a degradation as time goes by because the person respects you less and less. So what you want to do is you want to have very high standards and very high boundaries in terms of what you don't accept and enforce them always. Because what happens is, usually when you have these small tests, they're not going to quit or they're not going to stop being a customer just because you don't accede to a ridiculous demand. And if they do, they weren't good customers to begin with. But what happens is when they test you and they find out that they cannot really break your boundaries because you don't allow that, then they're going to respect you more. And clients who are loyal, but that could become a little bit less loyal because they would respect you a little bit less, they're going to keep respecting you. So you continue in a competent, fulfilling relationship. Then another thing that you have to do is focus on results. This should be basic by now, but at the end of the day, people don't buy from people that they like. People don't buy services or enter professional relationships with people that they like necessarily. They enter relationships and they buy from people that get them the most results. And this is usually the coaching framework, right? I don't care if you like me, I just care that you get better and improve. In many cases, clients can even be very irritated or dislike you in that moment, but it doesn't matter because you are going to get them results. And at the end of the day, what's going to happen is that logically, they're going to realize that this is for their own good and they're going to continue being customers. I don't know of any customers that left a relationship because they felt offended or they felt like you were irritating them or telling them a hard truth to their face. But I do know of customers that left because they didn't get enough results. And that's the only thing that matters. As the different programs or services change with time, you need to be aware that you need to continue providing results to those people. It's one of the few things that keeps them being loyal customers, especially in the high-ticket space. Then another important thing is to share something exclusive. You need to have something that other people don't, or even compared to your own content in the public, you need to have exclusive things for people who are clients. Because what usually happens is you have a freemium model. You teach certain things for free, then maybe you have a book or a course, and then you have a more expensive consulting or coaching service. And what needs to happen is that people expect different results at these different levels. It's a value ladder, right? The more that they pay, the more results that they want. So at the end of the day, if you're pretty much just saying in your coaching or in your service the same thing that you're already doing in a book or free content, then they're not going to stick with you. You need to have something that's exclusive that you don't share with the general public. And this does not necessarily need to be techniques or content. It can just be, for example, convenience. You can have a lot of resources just aggregated in one place that doesn't happen in the public space. Or you can do the same thing, but do it a lot faster with the coaching or the consulting. But at the end of the day, there must be something exclusive that serves as a reason for people to pick you. And then another thing which is important is to keep putting in the effort. People know when your heart just isn't into it anymore, when you're not putting in the effort, when you don't want to be there, when you're doing something else while you're talking to the person at the same time. And this can both happen to the service provider and to the client themselves, but that indicates a degradation of the relationship. So what happens is, even if you fulfill all of the other requisites for people to be loyal clients that keep coming back to you, you still have to be aware that if you don't put in the effort, they're going to notice that and they're not going to like it. Because in a lot of cases, especially with coaching or certain types of consulting, people are paying for your time. So if you are not giving them your undivided attention, then you're not worth their time and they're not going to renew. And by the way, you can even ask yourself, why are you there in the first place if you're not giving them your undivided attention? But at the end of the day, you have to show effort. Even if this is basic, even if you have done it 300 times, even if you know exactly what results they're going to get, in what you're going to go through, what you're going to present, the same exercises every time, still look like you're putting in the effort. Actually put in the effort. Because if you don't, if you're just going about it mechanically, the person is going to notice and they're going to be ruthless in terms of cutting you as a service provider. If you've enjoyed this video, take a look at the Everyday Negotiations playlist that tells you how to negotiate and how to sell things in everyday life in many different situations.